Hey, everybody! Happy Wednesday night. It is 6 o'clock, so it is so good. Y'all are like 12-year-olds. That's good. Um, we'll open in prayer, but before we do, just so y'all know, so probably on the table over there as you came in, we have a handout that looks a lot like this one's black and white, but the full color ones are over there. A handout that goes with tonight's discussion, okay? That complements what we've done the first 3 weeks. And then these are optional if you would like to pick them up, or if you have someone in your life that it would be, you think, helpful to share them with. And we'll kind of walk through what each of these could be used for, and why I thought maybe it was helpful to give you these resources as well. So, again, thank y'all for hanging in here for week number 4. We've made it to the end, and we're going to pray, and let's begin. Father, we thank you for tonight, and God, as we sit and learn in this room, we are mindful that there are places in the world where people don't have that luxury. Because there are conflicts breaking out. We think of all that's happening in Israel and in Lebanon, Lord, and we're mindful of Ukraine and situations in countries in Africa, God, where not just for Christians, but for people in general, they live worried about what's going to happen because this world is so broken, and hatred is real, and anger is real, and it is erupting, and it's taking lives. And that breaks our heart. And we believe that you are the God of peace. And so I ask, Lord God, that peaceful resolutions would be met in these conflicts around the world, that lives could be saved. And Father, I pray for those recovering from the hurricane last weekend. I know especially in the Carolinas, they are really, really struggling in the mountain area. And I pray, God, that people through the presence of your church could be reminded that there still is hope in the world as they pick up the pieces of their life. God, I thank you for the work of our disaster relief teams. And God, I ask you to comfort those who are grieving the loss of someone in their family, a friend who lost their life in the storm and the flooding that followed. That Jesus, you would meet with them, you would minister to them, and if they don't know you as Savior, Jesus, you would reveal yourself to them. Let them know how much they need you and how much you love them. And so, God, now I just pray again for a great discussion. I pray that your Holy Spirit would guide my words, guide our conversation, and that coming out of tonight, God, we can have some practical steps that we can follow through on, some really actionable ideas that will help us have a better relationship with technology and lead our children and grandchildren to have healthier relationships with technology, with screens, the internet, and social media. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. As I prayed and as I've mentioned the last several weeks, tonight is the night where we are going to walk through some practical steps and maybe some parameters, broadly stated parameters that maybe you would want to follow with your children, or you might want to pass it along to your kids as they raise your grandchildren, or maybe you have a neighbor who has children in their home and you think it would be helpful to them. And as we kind of work our way into these practical solutions, the first thing we need to realize is that the problem we face is, according to Jonathan Haidt, he calls it this, a collective action problem. A collective action problem. That is a situation in which all individuals would be better off cooperating, but fail to do so because of conflicting interest. So in this case, what that means, collective action problem, is that some people say, this isn't a problem for me, it's no big deal in my family. As a result, I'm going to let whatever needs to be done with my kids be done with my kids. Or my own personal habits as an adult. It doesn't bother me. It's kind of like a libertarian mindset. Like, get off my lawn. I'll stay in my lane. You stay in your lane. Okay? Here's the thing. On problems that are collective action, we have to be willing to give up our right to choose our own path for the sake of the greater good. Does that make sense? We have to say, I will give up, and we've talked about that a lot, actually, in our study of 1 Corinthians, if you think about it, right? That's been a theme that's come up, is you give up things for the good of the greater body. And this is one of those issues as a society where adults are going to have to be willing to say, I'm willing to be inconvenienced for the sake of my kids or the sake of my grandkids. I'm willing for it to be a little bit more of a headache for me to do certain things on the internet for the sake of my kids and my grandkids. I think the illustration we kind of go back to in week 1 was, and again, your Baptist pastor is not promoting smoking cigarettes, but at all. But we had to, in our country, when it came to smoking, what are some changes we made? Collective action problems. We were like, okay, no more vending machines that have cigarettes, right? We all remember when they were vending that, because it was too easy for teenagers to go and buy cigarettes. Instead, we need to inconvenience the adults just a little bit. They have to go see a real life person to buy their smokes, okay? Same thing with our phones. We, as adults, need to be inconvenienced for the sake of our kids. So, what does this mean? So, what is it gonna bring around? What do we collectively need to do? Okay, so he talks about voluntary coordination. Here's simply what that means. We talked about last week, if you remember, that even if your child doesn't have a phone, right, that their experience of school has already been radically altered because everyone else has one or everyone else has a tablet. As a result, less talking between classes, less laughter, less eye contact, all those things. Which that means what? That the current is swift coming against our kids, coming against our grandkids. As a result, we cannot, one family can try to stand against it, and that's good. Like, if only one family in here is like, I'm going to do something different with cell phones, and everyone else is like, I'm falling away. I don't care what we've learned. I don't care what we say. We'll do it. You can make a good faith effort, I think, as an individual family to do it, and maybe you get somewhere, but it's more impactful if you get families to come to a common agreement of, this is what we're going to do. We're friends, we're in the same connect group, or we work together, or we're neighbors. We are going to agree. We are going to not allow our kids, when they're 0 to 6, to stare at a screen or watch TV all day long. We're not going to give them a phone until they're 14. And why do you need the group? So that, right, your kids have friends who are like them. It'll help them not have to say, everybody else is doing it, Mom. Why am I the one who's sticking out like a sore thumb? And we can all put on I'll be honest, a little bit of an arrogant parent persona and be like, it's not a big deal. But we all felt that way about something when we were growing up, didn't we? Like, everybody else is doing it. Why are you keeping me from doing it? And so why don't we strengthen our kids by giving them peers who are given similar guidelines that we're giving them. Okay, number 2, social norms and moralization. He talks about, if you get voluntary coordination, that slowly over time, even in your community, you can change norms and moral opinions about kids with cell phones, right? It can become a morally negative, right? Where people look upon that that's where people see that as the failure in parenting, and not letting, and it's not a failure in parenting to let your kid go to the park by themselves, right? Just down the road. That's not the failure in parenting. But that takes time to shift those social norms and moralization. But that is something that we can do. Next is technological solutions. And so the big thing I think that we face online, obviously the lockable pouches are things that our schools use, better basic phones. But the big thing we face online is age verification. Do y'all know that? Age verification is what makes it so difficult, right, to make sure our kiddos are not either on social media when they shouldn't be, or not visiting a pornographic website that they shouldn't be, that are, according to our law, you have to be a certain age to visit those websites. But age verification in our country is kind of a joke, all right? There's laws been passed, but there's nothing that really requires any of those websites. Like Instagram, while they do have a basic level of age to enter into that contract, they really, if you tell them their age, they're not going to investigate your kid's age. Does that make sense? Like if your 11-year-old tells them, I'm 14 years old, they're not going to go look them up to see if they're telling you the truth. So we've got to come up with ways to make age verification actually easy and possible online. We have to. I think that's a non-negotiable. And then laws and rules. So currently, internet adulthood, by that I mean the ability to enter into a contract with a social media company or other company online where they can collect your data and collect your information and then sell it to people. That age is currently 14, okay? And if you know, the history of that law is that the guy who actually proposed it several years ago, he wanted it to be 16, like the guy who originally wrote the law. But, and Haidt goes into more detail, because of a political compromise that I'm sure had lots of different reasons for the compromise, they brought it down to the age of 14. Laws and rules. What could we do to make our schools phone free, right? Maybe it's the state level, maybe it's at a local level. But do we see the value in making our schools phone free? And then longer, more frequent recesses. Remember, because part of what we're trying to do is not just say this is what's wrong, but also this is what's missing, right? That our kids need more free play. They need to be outside. He even talks about honestly, through high school, our kids need some kind of physical activity to get outside and not just to be shuttled between classes into a lunchroom, quickly outside, then back to class. They need some physical activity. And of course, the reason we saw recesses become shorter and less frequent was because of the study back in the early 80s that showed that kids in the U.S. were falling behind Koreans and Japanese and in those standardized test score areas. As a result, they thought, well, the only way we can get our kids where they need to be is we need to cut back on recess, but they also cut back things like music and art, PE. All those things were sliced and diced to create more time for those core subjects. And we're reaping the consequences of that because maybe we're not forming our kids to be well-rounded. There's something they're missing. So collective action problem, that's what that looks like. Now, we're going to begin to walk through, I think his kind of breakdown is super helpful. This is from his chapter for parents at the end of the book. He talks about what I'm going to call collective action solutions. So these are things that groups of parents could come together around and agree upon, okay? This is how we're going to try to raise our kids corporately. It takes a village kind of thing, and we're all going to do it the same way. So for young children, things he talks about, obviously, that we've hit upon. Kids need their parents to be the secure base. They need free play. You as the parent, from the moment they are observing you, your kids from 2 months, 3 months old, as they observe your behavior, they are picking up on cues. So you need to model healthy screen behavior. And then around your house, especially as they get older, up through the age of 5, let them help out. Let them have jobs in the house. And I think my struggle with that when my kids were that age is, I'll be real honest, it was unrealistic expectations about how my 4-year-old would do a chore you asked him to do. Does that make sense? Like, and this is true of me and Lauren and probably many of you, like, the reason we don't let our kids do it is because they can't do it like a 40-year-old. They just don't have the attention span. They don't have the fine motor skills. They don't understand how it all fits together. And it's okay. And we just have to be okay with that. So what about screens specifically? He says that until 18 months, and limit screens to video chatting with an adult. Limit screens to video chatting with an adult. And that seems like, okay. But then we think about maybe even in your family or what you've witnessed at the grocery store or Walmart. Like, it's like, why would he have to say that? Like, because people are handing once their kid can hold the phone with 2 hands, they're handing them the phone so they can watch a cartoon while they're going around the grocery store. Or while they're doing chores. Like, they just put it into their hand and want them to hold it. He then goes from those next 6 months, 18 to 24, to limit screen time just to educational programming with a caregiver. 2 to 5, you can expand it outside of non-educational screen time. And then 6 and older, encourage healthy habits and limit activities that include screens. Now, if you go to the next page, he then flies and goes to ages 6 to 13. And this is where, especially as your kids get older, where your conversations about phones, the internet, social media, and texting all have to occur, okay? Like, this is where you begin to have those conversations repeatedly because kids are like adults, okay? It takes more than them hearing it more than one time to understand and to learn. So, I'll let y'all read the top and everything. But you'll notice kind of the big thing is right here. When it comes to as you integrate screens into your kid's life, this is probably especially true as your kids approach 10, 11, 12, 13. You have to learn how to use parental controls and content filters. You need to monitor and look for signs of digital addiction. You need to delay opening social media accounts until 16, and talk with your preteen about the risks and listen to their thoughts. So we're going to go through these handouts in just a second, but first I want to say this. These are the conversation topics you have to have with your kids, right here. And there's probably more, but these are the ones that you've got to talk to them about. So social media in general, what is social media? How do you use it? What could go wrong with it? Cyberbullying, okay? Online predators, okay? Pornography, sextortion, and the fear of missing out. That's FOMO, fear of missing out. Where, like we've talked about that, where a kid would see their friends on social media going to some place they were not invited to, they feel left out, and they feel worse about themselves. And I think one of the things, though, that us as adults and caregivers for kiddos, one of the things we struggle with is, how do I know when it's time? When it's time to begin to introduce our kids to these screens. With that in mind, here's this handy-dandy little evaluation. All these resources are linked on Jonathan Haidt's website, The Anxious Generation. These are things he recommends. So this is a self-evaluation for teens and a self-evaluation for parents. The parents are like, is my teen ready? And the teen is, am I ready for a personal device. So how about this? So questions he asked, like number 3 for teens. Do I have good personal hygiene? Okay. Number 8, am I able to have calm conversations with my parents about the proper use of technology? Do I have self-control over my emotions when things don't go my way? Number 11. Or on the parent end, as they evaluate, things like, can I have calm conversations with my teen about tech use? Am I familiar with safe tech options such as starter phones and watches? Do I feel that my teen has developed a healthy foundation of screen-free activities? So you can work through those 14 questions, and then there's not an answer key, right? There's not like if you score this, you should do this. But it gives you some broad parameters of how you can approach it with your kids. And be like, we're not ready yet. Or it could be, I'm not ready yet. Like, I as your mom, I as your dad, I have some things I've got to work through as you're getting yourself ready for it. Because not every kid's the same, okay? We all know that. Like, that's not rocket science, but we need to hear that. Not every kid's the same. And they're going to need different ways of parenting. So, also at this same time, and all these handouts are over on this table if you're interested in them. So there's an organization in Connecticut called Wait Until 8th. It started in a town in Connecticut. Wait Until 8th is a kind of a grassroots effort that was started by a mom that tries to organize parents into groups of at least 10 families who agree to certain parameters on how they will use screens and social media with their kids. And so Wait Until 8th has all sorts of resources, and one of them is this. It just says, Our Family's Phone Plan. And it's super helpful because I'm a big fan of, like, there's no reason not to reinvent the wheel when someone's already done a great job making the wheel and building it themselves. So, like, if you just look at this first page, and these are all things, like, this is what your kid has to understand. The phone belongs to my parents. They are permitting me to use this device. This is a privilege, not a right, for our kids to understand that. Then an opportunity for you to list as a parent all the monitoring parental controls you're going to put on their device. For your kids to list out any accounts they have and every password that they have. Passwords are not private in your family. When your parents call or text, you better answer. My phone will be used in designated places. So where in the home can you actually have that phone? So shared spaces. I understand where the phone is not allowed. List those places. The phone's curfew, so that's when you're going to put it to bed, like when you are going to leave it behind so you can go to bed. And then what are the penalties? What are the penalties if you break that rule? Like, lay out that stuff on the front end. As parents, we often don't think about that, do we? We don't think about what the penalty is until a penalty needs to be enforced. So sometimes when that happens, I think often when we don't think about it on the front end, in the middle of it, we do one of two things. We either go way too extreme on what the penalty is, that is so outsized to what actually has happened. So it's like your kid can't take their phone into their bedroom. They carried their phone into their bedroom, and you found them in there on their phone in their bedroom, and you're like, I am taking this away. You will not see it for 2 years. Like that extreme. Or it's on the other extreme, which is, we all make mistakes, and there's no consequence. Instead, if we're proactive in coming up with what those penalties are, I think we're able to be more reasonable in what is an appropriate penalty. And I think as our kids get older, when they're 12, 13, 14, 15, I don't think it's a bad idea in these conversations to be like, so what do you think's an appropriate penalty if you break one of these rules? What's the appropriate, the first time you break it, the second time you break it, and the third time you break it? And have them to have some buy-in into what's going on in your house. And then there's all this stuff on stuff about the internet browsers and social media. People can work through that. There's all these things, like more points that you can read through as a family. And so I think this is really super helpful if you're going to be getting your child a phone. And my suggestion would be walk them through this a couple weeks before they receive it. Like give them some time to percolate on it and understand what's going on. And then they also have a couple more handouts. There's another agreement over there if you're interested, like a covenant agreement between parents and kiddos. And then we've got this handout. This handout is Let's Talk About Texting, which is super important. Like, we think of text as adults as harmless. Our kids can use it, and it can be used against them. And so this talks about the dark side of texting. It talks about rumors and bullying. It talks about miscommunication and all the conflict that emerges. It talks about being pressured to send sexually explicit photos of yourself. And, I mean, I would go as far to say one of the things we talk to with our daughter already, she doesn't have a phone, but one of the things we talk to her about, and our son, is like, it's really not a good idea to send your photo to anyone that's not in our family. Like, if you want to send a photo to your cousin, that is fine. Like, she's your best friend, Evelyn. Go for it, right? If you want to send a photo to your Gigi or your Nana, go for it. Because why do we lay down that, like, it's better just to not send photos? Because in our world of photo editing, it is very easy for a malicious party, if they were to get that photo of your child, which is them having fun at the beach or at the pool or in your home, and it's a photo of them, their face, they will take that face and put it on someone else's body that's in an inappropriate position. And then what happens is that photo, which is not your child, is used to shame your child and honestly wreck the soul of your child as it circulates through their school. It happens all the time. And that's why we've told it, like, just don't do it. We're telling you, don't do it. We want to tell our kids, because we all get these text messages, don't respond to people you don't know. And don't text while they drive if they're 16. The other thing my family does, so our kids have a tablet, an iPad, and they have an Apple Watch, so we can call them. What we do for our family is I get to decide who my kids' contacts are. The only way my daughter can get a text message or a phone call from someone is they have to be a contact that I have added to her contact list. I have to okay it. Same thing for my son. Versus what can often happen in our schools, and y'all know this, is like everybody on the first day, no big deal, right? Trades phone numbers with each other as everybody gets a phone, right? And then your daughter, your son has given their phone number to a friend. They put it down, they put their number in, but then, right, that friend, someone grabs their phone. Kids do this all the time. They grab their phone and they start like adding all the numbers from that person's phone to their phone, and your kid never meant to give their number to that person. And then that person starts calling it, and they're acting like they know them, and they don't. Like, I'm talking really fast, but like that's how it happens fast. And so we want our kids to know, like, if you don't know if you don't have the number saved, don't tell them. Don't say anything. Just delete it, block it. You can unblock it if you should have kept them, okay? Like, we'll work that out later. But on the front end, it's better to be, I think, for the soul of my kids, when it comes to how people treat them and how would want to be malicious towards them, I'd rather put up some firm boundaries on the front end that I get to push back a little bit later, versus having to bring them in after allowing too many things to happen. See, look at this. This is here we go. Follow the grammar rule before you send a text. Before you fire off a text, follow the simple rule. Would the message you're sending be appropriate for your grandma to read? If not, do not text it. You have no idea who will be reading your text. It could be a friend's mom, dad, or sibling. Your former best friend could blast out an embarrassing text you sent her to 20 of her new best friends just to spite you. If you're not comfortable sharing whatever you are texting with your grandma or having it read over the loudspeaker at school, don't text it. That's a great rule, don't you think? So, and this just kind of walks your kiddo through it. Here's like on a handout like this or this conversation. This is not something you do. Y'all probably know this. So you're like, why are you talking to me like this? I'm sorry. These are not conversations that occur in 30 minutes. These are conversations that you like talk about one aspect for 30 minutes, and then you go about the rest of your day, right? And then you circle back, and you have another conversation talking about that, but talking about something else. And then you go about the rest of your day, and then you circle back. Like this is this ongoing conversation that you're having, and we have to realize, right, our kids are going to make mistakes. Our kids are not just going to make mistakes. They're going to willfully disobey you in this area, right? Like, I don't know that I applaud it, but it's normal. I willfully disobeyed my parents. You probably willfully disobeyed your parents when you were a teenager as well. Maybe Danny didn't. I don't know. He seems like a really nice guy. And so when our kids willfully disobey and we catch them, what should we do? Well, we should confront them and love them. And then talk to them again about why we have this rule in place. Don't shame them. Don't threaten them. Talk to them. Love them. Explain it to them. Wouldn't we all agree? Once you have kids and you think back to who you were when you were 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, you realize how much of a knucklehead you were. Right? Because your parents' rules didn't make sense to you either. But now as a parent, what your parents didn't let you do, it's more likely it begins to make sense to you, I think. It makes more sense to me. Like I remember my mom when I was in college. And, I'd come back for summer break, and I'd been at college all year. I never came home. I was at Ouachita, I just had a good time. I was used to being able to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and going out and hanging out with friends at all hours of the night, right? Not doing anything, like nothing illegal happened. Nothing dangerous happened. We were just hanging out. And I remember that summer when she said, hey, you have to tell me when you're going to be home. And you can't, you have to be home by this time. I was like, what? I was through the roof mad. I was so irritated. Who does she think I'm... And now as a parent, that makes complete sense. Total sense. If you're going to be in my house, I get to call the shots. Because nothing good happens after dark. And I think we just have to have that grace with our kids for them to understand it. So this is about texting. I hope maybe that's helpful for you. The next handout is the final one I want to kind of mention is this. This is our social media family conversation guide, again from the organization Wait Until 8th. And this, again, these are the concerns. They just kind of list all of these concerns you want to talk to your kid about regarding social media. It has a point, so you can read about what sextortion is, because you kind of know what it is, but you don't know how to explain it to your kid. And these concerns walk you through, because social media the concerns we have are different than the ones we have just by giving our kid access to the internet. And so we just want to be specific with them. And we want to teach them to be responsible, right? Wise, responsible young adults. It can happen. It just takes time. All right. And then if we kind of move forward, he lays out for kind of teens, ages 13 to 18, encourage your teen to get a driver's license as soon as possible. I have a question for y'all. Did anyone have kids in the room, grandkids in the room, who delayed getting a driver's license for as long as they could? Anybody have? Yeah, some of us do. No, some. Okay, I have noticed. I remember when I was 16 years old, everyone wanted their driver's license the day they turned 16 because they wanted complete freedom. They wanted to be able to go to the Sonic and cruise Military Road in Benton. That's what we did. But then I've noticed over the last 10 years-ish, kids less and less and less are interested in having their driver's license when they're 16 years old. For a variety, and I think partly, I think a lot of them are super nervous about getting it because they've been so neck deep in screens that had no real life consequence. To be put behind a wheel that has a real life consequence feels like it's way too much. I think kids, the reason we wanted them when I was 16 was so that we could see our friends, right? We wanted to hang out with them. Well, they're constantly connected to their friends. It's not like a real embodied relationship, but they're always with them. They can always kind of reach out to them. They don't feel that need anymore. And they find they've replaced those relationships often with what? Scrolling Instagram, video games, pornography, all those things. So his idea is this: encourage your teenager to get the driver's license as soon as possible. As soon as, and again, every kid's different. My son wasn't ready at 16 to have a driver's license. He won't be. He turned 16 in a couple months. He's not ready. Just not. And some kids just aren't. Really, full stop. You could do everything you wanted. They're not ready. And that's okay. But get it for them. Help them get it as soon as possible. His point is this: they need to exercise that freedom in their life. They need to be able to kind of expand their boundaries and go places by themselves, and you trust that they can come home. You trust that they can find their way. My biggest fear is they can't find their way home. They get a little lost sometimes. Let's be honest, okay? It happens. Another thing, again, give your teen more responsibility at home. That kind of goes without. Encourage your teen to find a part-time job. I think those are becoming fewer and fewer in the world, teenagers that do that. And then he makes this suggestion, which isn't something people often do, to take a gap year after high school. Why would you take a gap year after high school? Because it's absurd to think any 18-year-old has their life figured out and has it planned out so they can immediately step in. Some kids I get do, but most don't. And so it might be more productive. It might save you some money, save me some money in the future, for them to take a year, work, have some experiences, and figure it out before they entered into that next phase. So what do you want? What are you trying to do here through 13 to 18? When it comes to screens, what you're trying to do is to slowly give them more autonomy and personal responsibility online. It doesn't mean you never check in on them. It doesn't mean they get carte blanche access to anything they want on the internet. Not at all. But it means you are trying to allow them to show they can be responsible. Mom, I can have the web browser on my phone and I won't go to a pornography website. I won't search for it. I won't dabble in anything. I won't do it. Or, Mom, I promise, I won't go spend 2 hours on Instagram. Okay? I'm going to let you have an account, daughter, but you can spend 10 minutes on it a day. So, those are the things we're trying to give them healthy habits and then give them personal responsibility so that by the time they're 18, 19, 20, right? 18 really, where you give them like, okay, I've done my best. Like, now let's see what happens. And like, you're still there to coach them. You're still there to love them because it may not go perfectly. Most likely it won't. But you've tried to build them up and give them the tools so that they are ready. So that, when they're 18 and like, it would be a disservice to our kids if the moment they turned 18, that's when they finally had an opportunity to surf the internet. You got to do it before they're 18. It terrifies me, to be honest. It's terrifying. It really is. Because of everything you can find online with a simple search that means nothing at all. Legitimately. But it's a disservice to my son and my daughter if I wait until then and expect them then to be able to use it responsibly. I've got to show them. I've got to allow them. They can earn this. And it just reminded me of that verse in Luke 2:52, that what we're doing in a different hour, at a different year, in a different moment in history, is we're helping our kids grow in wisdom and stature. Wisdom is applying God's truth to everyday life. That's like a layman street level definition. Wisdom is living life God's way. That's a wise life, okay? Like, we can overcomplicate it, but it's God's way of life. And so we want to teach our kids what is God's way of life when it comes to social media, when it comes to screens, video games. What is God's way? And believing that if we do it God's way, in favor with God and man, like during this, as we nurture them, we are trying to build up their relationship with God at the same time, right? We are seeking that with our whole heart. We can't, y'all know this, but I think sometimes as parents and grandparents, we focus on what we need to keep from our kids, what we need to protect our kids from, and then we lose sight of what we need to instill and invest in them, right? As we're keeping them from the bad things, we have to invest the good things into them. We have to pour it into them. So, and this is like at the bottom. These are his 4 pillars for a healthier childhood in a digital age. And I'm curious about this. So, he says no smartphones before high school. Okay? No smartphones before high school. Do you think that's a wise choice? And is it a reasonable choice? Some people said yes. Other people are sitting on their hands, and that's fine. Is it too much to ask based on the data research we have? No? Okay. I think most of us are like, no, it probably isn't too much to ask. And again, I go back to a comment I made a couple weeks ago. If your child needs a phone, it doesn't have to be a smartphone. Doesn't have to be one, right? They still make those not as smartphones. So no smartphones before high school. Now, why? What are the reasons why your kids, your grandkids are going to say, this is stupid. You have to let me get one. What are the things they're going to tell you? They need it for study. They will say that. That's good. Yeah, I need it for school. I need it for school. And I'll be honest, that was an issue that came up last year when my son was in 8th grade. That they were using the phone at school to complete an assignment, and he didn't have one. Like they needed their phone to take a picture of things, and he didn't have one. And so that was a point of contention when he got home that night, as you would imagine. But yeah, look, so I need him for school, I need him for studying. What other reasons are they going to tell us? What'd you say? How am I going to call you when practice is over? Yeah, okay. How am I going to let you know? How did I let my parents know? Honestly, probably my dad was just sitting out in the parking lot waiting for me. Like, I'm being honest. Like, my dad would just sit there in his truck, and he was there for 30 minutes. You know, he'd get I'm just saying, like, he would get there 20 minutes before we were going to end, and we would go long, and he'd just sit there, and I'd, you know, if you wandered out late, he goes, well, I guess y'all went a little late, or something like. I think for us as parents, we are going to have to be willing to be more inconvenienced by our kids. Part of the reason they have them is it's a convenience to us, so we know, like, exactly when they need us to come, instead of, like, either they're going to have to wait, or I'm going to have to. One of us is going to have to wait. And maybe that's okay. I think probably is. Again, I turned out okay. What other excuses might our kids give us? Everybody else has one, right, Ann? And so that's why we want to try to say, well, they don't have one, and they don't have one, and they don't. So some people have them, and maybe many, but not everybody. And that's why we need a collective action solution to this collective action problem. Okay? As we work together. What else? Anything else you can think kids are going to push? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so we want, and you can get an ankle monitor that does the same thing, right? I'm here all week, guys. Yeah, no, and that's 100%. So Megan and I were talking a few weeks ago. Megan teaches at Lake Hamilton that one of the constant battles they have is parents will say, "What? I need to know I can get a hold of my kid in the middle of the school day." That's why they need a phone. I don't know. I mean, I've never done it, but they say, "Why, Megan? Why do they say that?" I'm sorry, I was not trying to be smart. But Megan, you tell me, why do they say that? Yeah. But they could call the office, and the office would get them a message. Yeah, I've done that. So you can. So on the AirTags, this is actually a true statement. A true statement is this. He said, get an AirTag, put it in their shoe, you know where they are. So there actually are insoles that you can buy that have they're made for senior adults who are suffering cognitive decline and wander off. I'm being for real. Like, y'all are laughing, but it's for real. And you take it out, put it in there, and there's a little compartment on the underside of it, and you put it in there if you needed to do that. I know that because we may or may not have done that before. Yeah. And I think so. Man, my mic's kind of. And I again, to that idea of, like, parents. It goes back to what we've talked about, is like this desire for mom and dad to want to know where their kids are during the school day, when you know where they are and you need to maintain constant contact with them. It really, I think, is a related issue to this. We really don't want our kids playing outside by themselves either. Like, yeah, like we just, like, we need to know they're always connected to us. Other thing, I think we've hit a lot, all those things. And so our response to that should be, number one, we want to be able to point to groups of people who are coming alongside of us. Number two, we want to say, if you need it for school, we'll figure out how to help you at home, okay? Right? I mean, we can use the family computer. Like, We'll use the computer together. You can use the computer out in the dining room, whatever. Like, we'll give you options to do your schoolwork. And then part of this, parents just got to get a grip and, like, release some things. No social media before 16. I think, like, that is probably, I think maybe especially acute, like we talked about, for girls. And a lot of that is going to be not just probably everybody else is doing it, but it's the fear of not knowing what's going on. And that's how they stay connected, not only to each other, but to culture at large. Like, that's how they know what's cool. That's how they know what's fashionable, right? That's how they know what good music, like the music everybody's listening to, is to be on social media and to swipe through all those things. And so, I don't know. You just have to answer it and say, we'll help you figure out because I'm really cool. That's what you should say. And then the number 3 was phone-free schools. And I know that's something our governor has, I think, is close to her heart right now. She's actually, read the book, and she's, I think, working maybe with the Department of Education on maybe what that looks like. I don't know, giving grants or whatnot. I know one of the reasons, and I understand, I think one of the reasons our schools aren't pursuing a phone-free school right now is because of parents. If they it wouldn't be a big deal to them if kids pushed back on it. They would deal with that. Like, they're used to that. But if they constantly have 4 dozen parents calling you every day complaining about the phones while they're trying to educate your kids, they're like, okay, like, we're going to pick the lesser, like, they're choosing what they believe is like the lesser evil that allows them to do something during the day. I don't know if that's the right choice, but it's a choice they're making that I can understand. And again, so what does that mean? It means if we want phone-free schools, not only do we need to rally together and get like-minded people together, we have to talk to our friends who are disagreeing with us on these issues and help them understand why it's a big deal. And a lot, and then see what happens. Because I do think we'd see better educational outcomes for our kids. Like, 100% we would. And then far more unsupervised play, childhood independence. We've talked about that quite a bit. And what does that look like? I think that's the question. What does that look like then for our 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds? Like, unsupervised play for 6-year-olds makes sense. 7-year-olds makes sense. Like, you go from allowing them to play only in the backyard to the front yard to you can then walk down the street to your friend's house. But what does that look like for 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds? What do we think it looks like? Half an hour early to Wednesday night, okay? What if a group of kids were like, we want to go, they're all 14, they're all, they all, like, are somewhat physically able, and they're like, we want to go hiking this weekend, Mom. Can you, like, drop us off at one of the trailheads, and we're going to go hike this area, like 4 of us? I mean, is that, what'd you say? If you have that tracking device. They could. But you could obviously give them instructions of like, hey, stay on the trail. Tell them horror stories of what happens when you don't stay on the trail. Make them up if you have to. The scarier, the better. But I think like those are the sorts of things. Like, I remember, and it kind of seems crazy now, but like when I was like 18 years old, but it was a bunch of boys that were younger than 16, 17-year-olds, we all there was like a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, a couple of 17-year-olds, and a 16-year-old, and like we would, from Benton, one of them would attach the ski boat to the back of the truck, and we'd drive to Lake DeGray by ourselves on a Sunday afternoon and go tubing. And like, Somebody busted their head open one time. But he's fine. He's married and has kids. He's doing well. But like that was like, and it was okay. My mom talks about that kind of stuff all the time when she was in high school. Like they would go out on Lake Washita. All her friends, all the boys that she was friends with, all of them had boats, and they would just all go tool around on the lake together when they're 15, 16, 17 years old. My mom watches, so if I got that detail wrong, I'll get a text message tonight. I also have to make sure I say correct things. But and I think like that's our struggle. Like, so what are the free play things that we should encourage and allow our older kids to do? And it does put them at sometimes in public places. It puts them in places where, something could go wrong on the trail, right? They could see a snake and get bitten. They could sprain their ankle. They could, there could be some strange person they encounter, right? Someone, right, who just kind of gives them the creeps. Doesn't do anything, just kind of gives them the creeps. But that's why it's not one of them by themselves. Like we would say, yeah, you can't go by yourself, but if you got 3 or 4, y'all go for it. I'll meet you back here at this time, right? Like, so set a time, right? Maybe to meet him back. I think Jonathan Haidt would say, because his kid at like 14, I told you that story, right, that he tells in the book. Did I tell y'all the story? Do y'all remember when his kid goes to the U.S. Open? Oh, okay, so y'all haven't read the book. Okay, so here's the story. Haidt is, so his son, when his son was 12 years old, they lived in Manhattan, and his son loved tennis, and they got tickets to the U.S. Open. And the U.S. Open is in, I want to say it's like in Queens, maybe. And so it's like it's subway, it's a subway ride, change trains, get on another subway, go up the steps, then you're at the Flushing Meadow, I guess. And then he has a blast when he's 12. Blast. Okay, next year rolls around, he's 13 years old. And there's one specific match his son wants to go see. And he has tickets for it. Someone gave him tickets. Only problem, the dad couldn't go. He had a work obligation or something. Couldn't go. And so he decided, well, his line of thought that he gives in the book is, he knows the subways better than than I do or his mom does. He knows how they all connect. He goes down the block to like the grocery store market for us. He gets back and forth to school. Okay, you can go by yourself. And so his son takes the ticket, gets on the subway, makes the 45-minute trek over to Flushing Meadow. It's like a night, y'all know, like they play like late night matches at the U.S. Open. Like they might start at 10 o'clock at night. I think this one started more at like 8 o'clock, but it was a long match, so it didn't probably get over till maybe 11. He doesn't give those details. I'm making them up, but I know it's late at night. Late at night, the match ends. And they had confirmed, like, his son got there. It worked out great. Like, they tracked him on the phone. They saw him there. He was good. He told him how he had a great time. He was texting him, I'm having a great time. He has a great time. So he leaves with the entire crowd. He gets back. He gets on the first train that he's supposed to. He has the subway memorized. He gets on the train, and he rides to his next subway stop. But here's what he didn't know. He didn't know that the next train he needed to go on didn't run that late at night. And so what does he do? He doesn't call his parents. Instead, he walks up to whatever street he's on in New York, and he hails a cab. Because his dad had taught him how to hail a cab. And like he's telling me, this didn't shake him at all, I guess. And his son gets home. Nothing happens. He gets home about 1 a.m. He's 13 years old. Yeah, like that's a whole other, like that. I don't like traveling it that late at night. But it's this thing like how he felt like for their family, he felt like that was a reasonable level to expand his child's autonomy. It could be for your 14-year-old, you've got 20 acres behind your house. They can go explore that all they want to. Come back when it's dark. Have fun. Or it's the hiking, or it's going out on the lake by themselves. Whatever those things are, right? To expand their freedom and let them feel this sense of accomplishment that they feel like when they come back and they did it successfully, and everybody's safe. So, we've been given a lot of information over the last 4 weeks, a lot of statistics, a lot of ideas, a lot of activities to do. I wanted to get all this content in your hand because, again, I think this is a critical thing that's going on in the life of our kids. But I think the biggest thing I want you to leave here with after these 4 weeks is this. This is kind of trite, but doing something's better than doing nothing, okay? And we have to begin to do something to help our kids. And I think the baseline is this. Like, the baseline is this. No smartphones before high school, no social media before 16. Because I see social media as sort of pointless, I would be tempted to push that to 18. Like, and I could be wrong on that. But no smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, maybe 18. And like, start there. And you may say, so you may be like, well, I've already given my 13-year-old or my 12-year-old a phone, or my 12-year-old granddaughter has a phone. What should I do? Obviously you could take it away from them. I think that's probably counterproductive in a lot of ways, to take back a privilege that you've given them. My suggestion would be, you're just going to have to be more vigilant with the parameters that they can use to operate and enjoy the phone. There has to be a strict time limit on how much they can use it every day. There has to be strict guidelines on where they will and won't use it, how long. All of those things have to be talked through, because something is better than doing something's better than doing nothing at all. And it's for the sake of our kids. And if we don't talk to our kids about these things, somebody else is talking to our kids about these things. And I can guarantee you, they're not going to talk about it in the terms you want your kid to learn about it. So that's our challenge. Like someone asked a couple weeks ago, like, what can we do to help our families? Like, we have to get information to them, and then we have to be the sort of church where it's okay and maybe even expected for kids not to have cell phones until they're 16. So, does anybody have any questions as we wrap up? Yeah.
What if these people that have had this cell phone, smartphone, what kind of parents are they going to be? Are they going to be as easy to convince about this as I am?
So, are you saying the kids who grew up with it?
They're going to be parents, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple ways it could go. I think I think there is a generation of people who that first Gen Z generation that grew up with it, the ones who are feeling it the most acutely, like the depression and the anxiety. I think that generation of people, not all of them, but quite a few of them, they want to figure this out because they felt so miserable for so long from the time they were so young. And no one wants to be anxious or depressed their entire life. They want to figure out what's causing it. Now, for the next generation, though, I would have, but to counter that, here would be my concern, especially as I look at like my kids' generation, is that, so the difference would be Gen Z has the example of people older than them to see life doesn't have to be that way. Like they may even have, friends who are a little bit older outside their generation. Life wasn't that way for them and they want that. But my concern for kids, my kids' age, that generation and younger, is that every year the water, that technological water, just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And their brain, frankly, becomes mushier and mushier and mushier, and they just begin to accept it for what it is. And my fear ultimately maybe is this. Maybe my fear is this. They don't get married and they don't have kids because they don't know how to talk to people. They don't know how to ever, and some obviously will, but many of them, like statistics say, like a lot of, like the age people get married in our country is not going down, right? It's going up. Like average age probably, is it like 27 now? 28 probably? What is it 30? Yeah, almost 30 years old. And you think about like a couple generations ago, like my grandmother, so Jesse's wife, I've talked to my granddad's wife on my mom's side. The scandalous story of our family, and Mom's going to be mad I tell this story probably, she's listening right now, but the scandalous part of the story was that my grandparents got married, and maybe you have this in your, this wasn't all that uncommon a couple generations ago. They got married and didn't tell anyone her last semester of high school. And then they told everybody after she graduated. Right? That was scandalous back then. But I don't know why. How did that come up? On kids getting married. Like that would be my concern. And that then if they do have kids, they are so distracted by they so don't know how to relate to them that then you have a generation of kids who grow up unattached to their parents, which then like the consequences of that are horrific. Like when kids are not attached to parents or grandparents, like so that is the other end. Like I think like it probably is going to come in a couple of waves culturally. But we can maybe try to stem the tide, at least within our circle of influence. Like, I mean,
Well, I mean, if you grow up one way, you think that's the right way.
Yeah. But I think, like, and you don't understand, it takes someone kind of speaking, like, what the consequences of that are, right? And I think, too, like, maybe it would leave you with this. Like, when it comes to these issues, I don't think we can change the world. Like us, right in here. I just don't. I think we can change our community, though. I think we can change our church to be more our circle of influence. Where, like, our community can be a great place for kids to grow up because we've made these changes together. And what other, like, well, we care about what goes on in other places, in other cities. Like, it's outside of our control, right? Does that make sense at all? So, again, thank y'all so much for your attentiveness and your participation and for caring so much. Over on the table, there are plenty of handouts. So all the handouts I walked through from every week and tonight, all the extra ones are all over there. Feel free to take as many of them as you want. Give them to friends. Give them to kids, whoever you feel like could benefit from them. And then if in the coming weeks you're like, man, I wish I'd grabbed that, we'll have extra copies in the office, and just feel free to reach out to us.
It's all on his website.
So those handouts, you can find, he has links to, most of them are from Wait Until 8th, and you can find most of those handouts on their website.